I received a question about what it might look like to do some product design in Alibre using surfacing. And of course, I love surfacing, so we have to go through this. Now, when we talk about surfacing, there's a few things. First off, as of the recording of this video, Alibre doesn't generate surfaces natively from sketch elements. Instead, we create surfaces from faces. We can convert our solids into surfaces, and we can import surfaces. So don't expect to do a lot of native surfacing work from sketches, but besides that, there's still a lot of ways that surfacing plays a part in advanced product design in Alibre, and let's take a look at how. One example is, of course, this header. There's a number of ways to make exhaust headers or exhaust manifolds like this. In this case, I make a thin extrude and I delete face down into a surface. I make another thin extrude, all right? And when I say I delete face, I just click on this delete face, and when we delete a face, the rest of it becomes a surface, right? So we can do that to create surfaces. But then I can trim the surface and create a 3D path. In fact, I create a 3D sketch all the way down here that is the edges of this. We don't see it in the tree in order because I pulled it into another feature, but that is how we might do it. So I can delete face, and we do the same thing for the next manifold run, and delete face again, and we do the same thing for the third manifold run here, and the fourth. Okay, now we can start sweeping on those 3D sketches that we've made. So we sweep, 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 and I think I created the mounting plate, and then we do somewhere around here a fourth one. There it is. And so we can use the edges of surfaces as sweep paths for products like this. So in this example, right, we've got the cool non-planar sweep award because we're sweeping in a non-planar 3D path. And once again, we create a revolution. We can delete face to create a surface. We can make a helical boss and turn that into a surface. We trim the surface so that we have a nice 3D edge, and we can sweep along the edge of that surface. And then we can create a pattern of that sweep and build our trophy around it. So surfaces can play a great role in these kinds of 3D sweeps. We can use surfaces to isolate bodies. So for example, I have this screw, and let's say that I've done a lot of work on this screw head, and I need to then do the thread on it. Well, let's say that I go to make this thread, and when I do, it goes right through the head of the screw, just like that. Well, we swept too far. We can try to adjust the length of our sweep, right? That's pretty valid. But maybe we don't want the abrupt ending that happens when we do. In other words, if I go to my height here, and I make this stop in the right place, well, now I've got this abrupt ending, and that doesn't look very realistic to me. And so we kind of need to go past it, but then we're going to cut into the head of our screw that we worked so hard to make beautiful. So what should we do? Well, there's, one very obvious answer is, of course, to go to the external thread. In fact, I'm going to get rid of my chamfer and then go to external thread. And of course, Alibre, whether you're using Atom, Expert, or Pro, we can simply choose a, let's go with a ANSI fine geometry, and just click on modeled. And sure enough, there we have it. As modeled, as you saw before, it was actually unified, or ANSI, not fine, but coarse. And it was, 1/4 by 20. So we just click on the box for modeled, and that makes it so easy. But if we're working on a process where we don't have a specific screw thread and it's just something that we need to do to one body, then certainly what we can do is convert our solid into a surface, and then do all of our things, and surfaces are not affected by solid operations. So if I edit this sweep, and I went to edit the sketch, but if I edit this sweep and I take this much higher, I can go right through and the surfaces are not affected by my solid operations. From here, I can bring this back into a solid and I have two things together just like new. All right, a great way that surfacing affects the way that we make models. We can sort of isolate these operations so one thing doesn't affect another that we've already done. Now let's say that I have this sort of box thing that has a hexagon mesh inside. Maybe we can call it an infill if we want it to be so granular as to model our own infill. When we want to have these kinds of boundaries, surfacing comes in handy. I can say, I'll extrude this, I'll shell it, and then I can make a surface around it, again creating a surface from the face. And we can turn the whole thing into a surface, and then I can make a hexagon grid. Well, then I'll unite all of these hexagons with an extrusion and turn all of that into a surface. And now I can create a solid extrusion that I trim with that surface. And there I've been able to generate the hexagon. I can trim my model with that surface that I created early on. And then I can remove that surface. I can then stitch it all back into a solid. So surfacing does wonders when you need to do this kind of thing. Now, there are many, many, many ways to make this exact same model. This was originally made as kind of an exercise to think about modeling with many bodies and how using many bodies can work together in Alibre. So surfacing does play a part here, but there are many ways to skin a cat. Finally, here's a snorkeling product, and how did we make something like this? Well, we did use surfacing. So we'll take a look at this snorkel. Once again, we create a loft, and again, this is a loft through the center here. We'll fill at the top of it, and then we can delete the face, again, back into a surface. We'll create an extrusion, right, the part that goes right on your teeth, and we'll make a surface right on top of that face. And now we can start using these surfaces to create a really cool product. I'll take this surface and trim out that oval section on the mouthpiece. So we'll trim that out, and now we can see there's no solid in the middle there. Then we'll thicken our tube into its own solid that is hollow. And I can get rid of that surface that I no longer need. And then I can cut out this extra tube part on top of the mouthpiece with this surface. So we'll trim the model and get rid of that surface. And from there, we were able to make a pretty complex relationship between solids, and we were able to do so pretty simply just using surfaces. And now we can add detail to our snorkel and be able to see a good finished product. So there's just a few ways of what it looks like to model with surfaces in Alibre. Let's take a look at one last example. This is a tort bowl, and if I move this all the way to the top, we can see a few uses of surfaces. Here I loft out a base, and then I create a surface out of it, right? So I convert the solid to a surface. Everything here is a surface, and then I loft out the top of the bowl. Why did I convert this base to a surface? Well, because when I go to shell it and make it hollow, I can make the shell only apply to the top half of the tort bowl and not into the base where you couldn't fit a spoon to enjoy your tort. Then we can, make an extrusion along the top, pattern that extrusion and fillet it. And then with that top done, we can make this back into a solid and connect it into the rest of our bowl. Then I can make a surface that goes around the outside of our tort bowl to mark the outer boundary, and we can work on giving it some real character here. I'll make my entire tort bowl a surface, so anything that I do doesn't affect the solid, and I'll make this little wavy pattern that I can convert into a surface by deleting face, and I can trim it along the outside. Now I can create a 3D sketch that runs along the outside, where this surface hits the outside of the bowl, and create a loft in its place where we can have a varying thickness surface loft that follows the outside of the tort bowl. Then I can pattern that around the bowl, and so I can have a pattern of these lines that go around the bowl, and finally stitch it back to a solid and have a finished bowl. And just like that, we have a tort bowl with some transparency so we can see the glass, but I think as a product this thing would really show cool. So those are some examples of how surfacing can be used when developing products in Alibre. Hopefully this makes things clear and useful. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the Alibre channel, and we'll see you in the next one.